Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's PatternFly community meeting. My name is Nicole. This is my first time running the meeting, so hopefully this goes smoothly, but we have a very packed agenda today. So we're going to cut right to the chase and get it going. First up, we have, well, let me start the slides. Well, I won't. First up, we have our Medium and Social Strategy Initiative presented by Alana. So I'll let you kick off the presentation. Go right ahead.
Thanks,
Alana.
Nicole. Let me just share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Awesome, thank you. So hi, my name is Alana. For a lot of you, this is your first time meeting me. I'm one of the UX writing interns on the content team for this summer, and I'm very excited to be focusing on PatternFly for my project work, and I'm thrilled to be inviting you to witness and contribute to PatternFly's social media journey. To launch into the specifics, I'd like to invite you for a moment just to think about how you would describe PatternFly, just a few adjectives. You can think them to yourself or throw them in the chat, whatever you'd like to do. I conducted this exercise before launching into what my strategy ideas would be. So I wrote down creative, collaborative, forward-thinking, innovative, and open. And keeping these 5 adjectives in mind helped me build the scaffolding and keep that consistent across our Twitter and Medium strategies. So without further ado, let's get social. PatternFly drives consistency, creativity, and collaboration in teams across the globe. So our objective in revamping our social presences is to bring those to scale. This is what I like to call our revamp roadmap. I blocked it out into 3 separate steps. So the first step already took place. That was our research. So I did a competitive analysis with a handful of design system Twitters to see what content pathways and strategies made their content successful and how we might be able to develop our content pathways being informed with those. Our next step is what we're currently on, informing our next steps with flyer voices. So you may have noticed on our Twitter, Medium, and email channels, we sent out Medium and Twitter Google Forms to get your thoughts and feedback. If you haven't filled those out yet, don't worry about it. I'll link it later in the presentation, and there will be a reminder email going out later in the week. This is an opportunity for you to share your thoughts and your voices so we can really map our social media content to you. And our third step, which I see as ever evolving and constantly ongoing, is using your feedback to grow our online content. So very briefly, I want to walk you through some of the findings I found when I conducted my competitive analysis with these design system Twitters. So some common competitor trends I found were frequent follower interactions, not only sourced from the competitor's own account, but diving into follower accounts and engaging with their content. So if a Twitter follower tweets out a question, for example, the Twitter design system account would answer that question. They had a consistent content creation, meaning that they posted on a regular basis. And this is something that we can grow and change as we see fit. There's no industry best practice standard as long as we do develop a specific cadence so everyone knows when to expect us on their timeline. And one of the main things that we can fold into our own strategy is celebrating our follower accomplishments and their stories. Google and Twitter did an amazing job of this with their video-based UX coffee mentorship and UX office hours, respectively. These were video and text-based opportunities that occurred once a month for industry experts to engage with anyone from an industry hobbyist to someone working in the field, transferring best practices and different ideals back and forth. These competitors also issued design challenges, 2 of which I found really interesting were a poetry challenge, where poets were challenged to craft using their design system with one of their pieces, and using different components in new innovative ways. Another component of these competitor trends was engaging with social issues and the global diaspora today. So some of this might look like Q&As pertaining to being LGBTQIA+ in the UX industry, or talking about a work from home series pertaining to COVID. So really putting a human spin on your content. So as we go forward sharing our industry thought leadership, we'll want to engage with those similar conversation starting tweets and provoke thought through our Medium publications as well. So now we can launch into how we're going to shape our own socials and how those findings can really mold how we continue. So I'm sure you are all very familiar with the concept of thought leadership. I divided our approach into three main verbs: educate, enrich, and empower. So we can educate our followers by providing them with industry-relevant content, best practices, stories, and insights. And with those, we can enrich and enliven our online UX discourse. So we have a very unique opportunity to branch out not only with our own content, but engage with other thought leaders so that we can be an active contributor to the conversation and define and uphold what it means to be a best-in-class design system and a best-in-class thought leader in UX. And one of the most important aspects of this thought leadership initiative is empowering our followers. We want to encourage and inspire you, our flyers, with our materials and invite you to share how you use PatternFly and how you assert yourself in the UX world. So as we design our social presence, we can do this by being storytellers, thought leaders, and being open about it. We can tell our flyer success stories, celebrate their accomplishments, and lean into PatternFly's open source narrative. We can thought lead by being clear, concise, useful, and conversational, and consistent with all of our thought leadership materials, and write for all of our audiences, both our professional audiences, our internal Red Hat audience, people external to Red Hat, and people who are diving into UX for the first time or who are hobbyists. And one of the most important parts of this social presence is continuing to be open. We want to evolve with our community engagement and be what I like to call open book, open source. So now we can dive into a little bit of the specifics for each platform. Our Twitter has about 866 followers at the moment, and we want to build content there that celebrates, empowers, and inspires flyers, like I said before. We want to engage in more UX thought leadership by partaking in those conversations, and we want to strengthen our sense of open source by engaging with our community. And we can measure these by becoming a timeline mainstay with that content cadence. We can increase our engagements by sourcing the content that matters to you through those Google Forms, and we can develop engaging hashtag campaigns to drive that further. We can also use Twitter as a way to promote our Medium articles internally and also engage with other simulating ones from other thought leaders as well. And our Medium platform, our goals differ a little bit in that we have an opportunity to put real faces to the PatternFly story here. We can lead the conversation in open source UX by folding in humanistic narratives. For example, an article just went out today by our other UX content intern, Jake, where he used Pride Month to show how inclusivity is vital to good UX. So we can create content like that and create content reflecting our community to have Medium be our voice and our face to the name. And we can measure these by supporting that consistent content cadence I mentioned before, increasing our metrics. Medium measures likes in claps, and it also follows with reads and followers and shares. So if we can tap into industry hot topics and social issues, we can not only get more eyes on PatternFly, but also encourage our own flyers to write about the things that matter to them. One of the main components of this is championing that these stories are written by flyers for flyers. Which brings me to the linchpin in our entire social initiative, which is flyer feedback. We want you to use your voice to shape ours. So you can speak out, share your thoughts, hopes, wants, and visions, because PatternFly's voice is a chorus of yours. One of the ways you can do this right now is to be heard through our Google Forms for Medium and Twitter. And through these gatherings, we can grow together. With your feedback, we can expand our content community one post and one story at a time. And I like to see this feedback as being a consistent thing. I don't want it to be just one and done. I want you all to have ownership over what your social media voices look like. So we'll be conducting what I like to call monthly fly-ins. These are emails with additional Google Forms or questions so that you can voice what's working for you, what's not working for you, and what you'd like to see going forward. We can't make this content journey alone, and you are our most valuable players. So these are 2 links to our Google Forms. I can also throw those in the chat later. If you haven't filled them out, I highly encourage you to do so because we want to form and embark on this path together. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alana. And next we will hear from Dave Taylor. He's been helping spearhead the OpenShift console's migration to the PatternFly React v4 release. And so he's going to share some of his experience with that migration. So whenever you're ready, Dave, you can take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Nicole. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Right, so my name is Dave Taylor. I'm a UXD developer. I am embedded in the OpenShift console team. So we are a consumer of PatternFly. And over the last 2 months, myself and a few other UX devs embedded in other product teams who are working with the PatternFly developers on some pre-releases to version 4. And we've been on a bi-weekly basis for the last 2 months or so. We've been getting these pre-release versions, bumping our PatternFly versions, and running them and finding build errors because usually an attribute had changed, and we were just sort of incrementally taking these pre-releases and trying to build them and fix our code base, and keep going and sort of iteratively handle these, so it's not one big drop all at once. And we contributed back and working with the PatternFly developers. We would identify workarounds, fixes, identify some of the more advanced issues such as like the victory chart updates. And I gotta say, I've been involved in a lot of migrations, breaking changes releases, and by far this is the most well thought out and most well organized and documented process I've been through. And let me show you some of the things. So early on, I used PatternFly developed these reports, which I basically used when I came across an error. I would go to these, and these are actually links in the doc. So if you guys can see this later, but there's various documentation out there, and most importantly is this breaking change notes. Whenever I came into a build error, I would go to one of these 2 pages, either the React breaking changes or the core breaking changes with CSS. And as you can see in this text, it's well documented, cross-linking to the actual PR that made the code change. So figuring out what had changed and how to address it in my own code base was right there. It was front and center, made it very easy. Toward the end of the process, these upgrade guides became available, which, as you can see in the top screenshot, it's well categorized, a lot more verbose, more of an overview of what's going on. So, I mean, it's almost, I don't want to say a no-brainer, but it's pretty easy to figure out, cross-reference, a change in your build to what had changed in PatternFly and figuring out what's going on. Because from the beginning, the PatternFly developers, when a breaking change went in, I think there were tags in the PRs that made, organizing this and capturing these changes in this text and instructions very easy. And I want to say, this is sort of my account of what went on. I think if, other teams that are going to migrate to PatternFly 4, they're going to have a much easier time because toward the very end of the process, these code mods became available, and they're very robust. Basically, I have been doing pre-releases for like 2 months, and my own code base, I made all these changes and made everything workable. And then I started running these code mods, and code mods is a utility, a script that will look through your source code. It knows what PatternFly changes had been made, and it will update your source code. It is limited, though. It's only, kind of simple, well-known changes. More the complex examples, you still have to do some stuff manually. But I would say the code mods fixed about 80% of the changes. So I have been manually changing these for 2 months. Once the code mods came out and I ran them, I actually threw away my changes because I preferred the code mods changes. They were actually more concise and really well done. So, other teams that are going to migrate to PatternFly 4, running the code mods will get you most of the way there. There are some limitations, such as like complex attribute changes, where it's not just this property name had changed to something. It's like this property name had changed, and we're passing in an object which has a whole bunch of other features. So there are limitations. The code mods, can't be that intelligent about what your code base is doing. So you will have to do some manual things, like complex nested elements. The code mods also don't deal with PatternFly CSS or SCSS variable changes, PatternFly global variables. So that's still sort of a manual process. And just to call it out, the victory charts had updated, so that's something code mods couldn't do. But I have to say, in general, it's a very straightforward process. Documentation is top notch. Helps out in so many areas. So my experience was great. Beta testing the pre-releases and contributing to PatternFly devs to help the migration. Me and a bunch of other UXD devs in other products helped really pre-test this and bake it in. So I think it's really going to be a good process. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. I know the team did a lot of legwork to make this as seamless as possible for people. So I'm looking forward to hearing how other teams do with their migration for sure. Okay, moving right along. Next we have accessibility team. They are going to give us some updates, and I'll hand the presentation over to Jessie to start with some of the accessibility updates.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen. So as we've talked about before, we've been making a lot of great progress with accessibility. So I thought we could call out some of the major changes that we've had lately with accessibility. And I'm going to cover two, and then I'm going to pass it off to Juntao, who's new to our team and has really jumped into these accessibility errors and issues, and it's been really great having him. So just to start off, one of the big changes we added was allowing for different focus management to the drawer. So we're now allowing for users to send focus where they would like to with this PR. And so basically what happened before that kind of inspired this is that when you would open a drawer, if you toggled this, let's say I would go by keyboard and open this drawer, it wouldn't send focus to the drawer itself. You would have to get through the entire DOM in order to get to the drawer, which is a pretty bad user experience for accessibility users. If I want to open a drawer, I don't want to have to go through the entire page just to get to the content I want. So with this new change, you can send focus right to the drawer and kind of handle that. So in order to do this, and I added flexibility, so if you want to change that focus, if you want to do something else, I have it as an on-mount function. So as an example of something you could do in your code is I created a ref, and then I attached that ref to where I wanted the focus to go. I added a tab index because the span is non-interactive, and so because of that, it would naturally be in the tab order. So I added the tab index, added the ref, and then I just kind of created an on-mount function to focus that element. So you could add any kind of on-mount function that you would want if there is a different way that you are handling that code. That's why I kind of wanted to add some flexibility. You can also add an unmount function as well. But yeah, it just kind of gives you additional flexibility while also improving the accessible experience. So that's the first change that I thought was pretty cool we should show. The other one was actually something we had in core. And this is something that we noticed a number of times, and we talked about, I think, a little bit in some other meetings. But I can use this the search site to show you what happened. Basically, as you would tab through, it would immediately open up the drawer, which obviously is undesired. So we added a little fix, which now, if you are an org, it doesn't do that. So I can tab through the page and go all the places that I would like to. So I can open it, and focus goes where I want. So we've just basically added some accessibility updates to the drawer that add improvements for the keyboard accessibility especially. This also helps with screen reader because as you would press enter onto this, it would read out the drawer the way you would expect. But those are the two that have been really important for drawer. And then we had Juntao work on two other ones, which I will let him share and talk to his work.
Thank you, Jessie. I'll share my screen.
You were welcome to share your screen. We don't see it
Oh,
yet. Oh, there we go. There we go.
sorry. This is the other. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Juntao, and I'm an front-end developer intern working on PatternFly and OpenShift. And today I'd like to talk about two accessibility issues that I fixed in the last release. So here I open two windows. This is release 2027 and then the release 2028. So let's have a look at the first issue. It's in options menu, this part playing with text. So let's have a look. When we press enter on the toggle button, it cannot autofocus on the first item, and so that we can not use up and down to control the items inside the drop-down menu. So let's have a look at the correct example, like this one. If we press enter here, we can use up and down to control it. So, and if we press tab or escape on the drop-down menu, it will close the drop-down menu and focus back on the item, but it will not behave like this. So this is very not user-friendly. So I add some fix here just to add some functions and event listeners to fix these problems. So here is the result. So if we press enter here, it will auto-focus on the first item, and then we can check or uncheck them. And also we can use tab to focus back on the toggle button. So this is the first issue. And the second issue is in overflow menu with the kebab toggle button. It's much more simpler than the first one. So it just cannot autofocus on the first item when we press enter on the kebab toggle button. So it's because we don't pass the index into it, and the index, if we pass the index into drop-down item, then the accessibility function inside the drop-down component will find the drop-down item so that it can autofocus on the first item. And the result, let me show the results. Okay, it will autofocus on the first item. So user don't need to do any change on the usage. They just use them as usual. And these are the issues that are fixed. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Next up is Michael Celedonia with some updates from PatternFly Design. I am, I think, gonna share my screen for this part.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Yeah, so we just have a few design updates to go through. Get that up, Nicole.
Yep.
I can do it too if it's easier.
I think I've got it.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. All right, so just a quick overview here. I think we can go ahead and jump into it. It's the next slide. So we've introduced sub-tab styling, essentially, which you can think of as like a secondary tab styling. So normally when you have two sets of tabs, the one underneath it, if it's just the same size and same visual treatment as the one above it, there's not much hierarchy there. And you really want some hierarchy to visually communicate that, hey, these tabs are a sub-level of this top level set of tabs. One thing to note about tabs is that we actually do have two styles of tabs. Open tabs, which you see here, and we've got box style tabs, which I thought I had in there, but I don't. But you can check those out on patternfly.org. But this secondary tab styling, where we bring the font size down to 14 pixels, can apply to both. And it's not that box style tabs or open style tabs are themselves primary or secondary. And we're actually currently working on improving our documentation and adding more guidance as to when to use open tabs versus box style tabs. But I just wanted to point that out, that they're alternate styles. They're not primary and secondary. Whereas what you're seeing here is primary and secondary. So typically you see these underneath, but we also want to support this happening. Say you've got a page header with these tabs, and then you have a card underneath that has its own tabs. You'd want the tabs in that card, which are underneath the top level of tabs, to have this secondary or what we're calling sub-tab styling. That's about it for tabs. The next one is a quick update to inline link font size change. So we actually always had this font size of these inline links at 16 inline link buttons as 16 pixels. And that led to weird situations where, for example, we've got this compact table where we bring all of our font size down to 14 to help with the compactness of it. If you had a button in there, it would retain that 16 pixel size, which you see on the left. And it's a little awkward because it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the font sizes and creates some weird spacing problems. It's just a little awkward. So we improved that to just have it inherit the font size of its parent. So in this case, it would go down to 14 pixels. And you can see it fits in a lot better there on the right. That's it for that one. So we added another label color choice of purple. Obviously, we want to have a good selection of default colors to choose from with our labels. And adding purple was just a color in our color palette, which we didn't have for labels yet. So we added a purple -50 color, and the -50 colors are actually a recent addition to our color palette for labels and for inline alerts. So anything that really needs a colored light background that we still need to be accessible, have accessible text over. So that's pretty much it for that. And the reason why we needed to add that, if you go to the next slide, is because initially when we first implemented these new labels, green and purple labels were using a purple or green and purple 100 background color. And the 100 background color was just a little bit too dark in terms of visuals, but also accessibility with getting a good contrast over that text. So we introduced that purple 50, but also this green 50, which we were, I think we just missed in the first round. So now we've got, you can see the right side there, they fit in a lot better with the whole set of labels and look a lot better. Yep, and then, okay, so we tried this thing where, so we've got Red Hat Text and Red Hat Display, which are two fonts, two different font families you can see them as. Red Hat Display is what we call a display font, and display fonts are typically used for like big headers and really nice display things. So you see it a lot in marketing or even in a lot of print work where you've got big, nice, big, bold headlines and big text. And it's primarily designed for that usage. In products and in PatternFly, we don't have too much of that, at least in our products. And, our biggest font size, I think, is what we see in our page headers, which the display font works well there. But actually, I guess I should go back a few steps here. But having both of those font families added some complexity in the code and also some complexity for the designer in terms of choosing which one to pick. And when we looked at it, we were thinking, maybe just as a quiet little quick house cleaning thing, we can simplify things by just getting rid of Red Hat Display, because when we used Red Hat Text for the situations where we were using display, it worked totally fine. It wasn't a noticeable or big difference. And so we thought we could do that, pretty quickly and easily, and no one would really notice, and then we'd have this benefit of much more simplified font implementation. Unfortunately, we ran into some issues when we started seeing it being used in product. It wasn't really rendering properly. It was a lot bolder than we expected. It didn't turn out as we expected, and we started seeing these issues that were a little more complex than we were hoping they would be, and it just wasn't totally worth it at this point. We were expecting this to be a really quick and easy thing to do, to just kind of clean things up. And it turned into a lot more than that. So we decided to roll that back. So we still have Red Hat Display and Red Hat Text. We might look at this again in the future now that we have a better understanding of what's going on. But we learned a lot, I think. I wouldn't call this total loss. We learned a ton about font implementation and how the Red Hat Display and Red Hat Text fonts are built. So yeah, we just decided to roll that back and called it a learning opportunity. So that's about it. And I think that's it for the design updates. Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. Next, we have Abby Donahue to talk about the newly published PatternFly Content Style Guide. Over to you, Abby.
Thanks, Nicole. All right, so I'm sharing my deck. Just let me know if you can't see the slides. A couple of months ago, I spoke at this community meeting about our efforts to revamp PatternFly's Content Style Guide. And at that time, we hadn't even really started the project. So a few months later, I'm really excited to announce that the Content Style Guide has been completely revamped and it's up live on patternfly.org. So we can take the next few minutes to kind of just walk through a quick overview. But for anyone who isn't familiar with the Content Style Guide, in a nutshell, it's a collection of writing standards, guidance, and best practices. And it exists to help you create consistency and unity, brand identity, and also efficiency among your content. And ultimately, this will lead to familiar, authentic, seamless, and intuitive user experiences. When we were first thinking about revamping the style guide, there were a few things that we were taking into consideration. First of all, we were collecting a lot of feedback from different flyers and engaging with people who used the style guide. And we came to the realization that we needed to unify all of our UX writing guidelines into a single resource. At the time, we had some high-level guidance on patternfly.org, and then we also had a more in-depth, comprehensive guide that was used internally at Red Hat. This led to some confusion because Red Hatters had to jump between two different guides, but also flyers, especially the flyers who aren't at Red Hat, they didn't have access to the most in-depth UX writing information. So we came to the decision that we needed to unify everything and have it all out in the open on PatternFly. We also wanted to expand upon what we already had. We had some wonderful getting started information on PatternFly, but we needed more detailed and more in-depth guidelines for our flyers. And lastly, we wanted to strengthen our content community. Having a style guide that is open source allows everybody to contribute. So this truly is a style guide that is owned and managed by every single flyer in the community. It still lives in its original location, so if you go ahead onto patternfly.org, you can access the style guide under design guidelines and then content, and you will see a multi-page style guide starting on the about page. To give everybody kind of a before and after view, before the revamping, the style guide consisted of 3 pages, style, voice, and writing, and now we have multiple pages ranging from about to brand, punctuation, and everything in between. Our goal was to make sure that the style guide was easy to navigate. Style guides aren't really meant to be read from start to finish. They're meant to be used as a resource, a reference resource. So the goal was for flyers to come to the style guide and then just quickly click on a section that's most pertinent to them instead of trying to do an endless scroll amongst a few different pages. So some of you might be wondering, how do I use the style guide? Well, it can be used for a few different writing styles. The style guide is largely focused on UX copy, also referred to as microcopy, and that's the words in the user interface. So chances are a lot of our designers do a lot of UX writing. The style guide can also be used for PatternFly documents that you might write, and also articles for PatternFly's Medium blog. Next question, how will the style guide evolve? Anything that's open source, especially anything on PatternFly, is always changing and evolving. We're actually already thinking of ways to develop this style guide even further. I foresee the changes happening in 3 different forms. So first of all, we'll have additions. We'll be adding information based on repeat content questions and also various flyer needs. And then feedback, we'll be making changes based on input from flyers, but also because this style guide is open source, flyers are definitely encouraged to contribute directly. And finally, usage docs. We'll be adding more UX writing information as time goes by to various usage docs, and you might even see some information moving from the style guide into the usage docs on PatternFly. I'm going to end there and let everybody explore the style guide on your own time. I really hope that you find it useful, and please send any kind of thoughts and feedback our way. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, the PatternFly React team has made a handful of updates and enhancements. And first, Katie will show us a quick preview of her new component she helped build.
Yep, hello everyone. Let me just share my screen right now. All right, cool. So I implemented the banner component this past sprint. Pretty straightforward component. You can see here that it has 5 different colors you can select from and display text in. By default, it'll go to this gray banner if you don't specify a variant. Otherwise, you can give it info, danger, success, and warning to change its default color. And then the other property for these banners is the is sticky, so it means it'll stick to the top of its container, but on our default docs, it's a little hard to just see that because they're all kind of in their own containers. So if you scroll down to the demos, you can see we now have a banner demo, which has 2 full-page demos to show kind of examples of how you can use a banner component in a full page. And if you click on that full screen, you can see this is just a default mock-up page setting, and you have a banner at the top of this content section, and it is sticky, so even if you scroll, it'll stick to the top of this container. And then we also have another example of sticky banners in a different kind of setup layout, where they are stuck to the top and bottom of the entire page instead of inside a container. And you can see if you still scroll, it'll still stick to the bottom. I think that about covers it, actually. It was a pretty straightforward one this time around.
Perfect. Next, it's Joachim will walk us through some of the updates he's made.
Hello. So several of our components that have toggles and menus that are similar to nature to dropdown have all received a new prop called menu AppendTo. And if you take a look at this issue, you can see a number of components that have been affected by this. So dropdown, select, application launcher, context selector, options menu. These have all received a new menu AppendTo prop. And what this prop looks like is it can take either an HTML element, or it can take a function that returns an HTML element, or it can be set to the string parent or the string inline. And just to demonstrate what this usage looks like, there is an example now under the modal component. The last example showcases the modal that has a dropdown. And the old behavior, which was one of the main factors for this PR, was that the problem was that if you had a dropdown inside of your modal and you were to click on it, it would actually drop in the menu inline into your modal and not break out. So that is equivalent to setting the menu AppendTo prop to inline. So that is the old behavior, which you might still want for in several other contexts, obviously not in this modal context. A simple way to fix this now is to set, so this is the dropdown component, is to set this prop instead of inline. You can just simply set this to parent, which raises the menu up a level and also uses popper.js to absolutely position it. So now it's an absolutely positioned menu. So that's a simple way to fix it. And if you actually look at where this menu is attached to, you can see that it's still within our modal container, but now it's been raised up a level and it's actually parallel to the old, to the dropdown. So that's a simple way to fix it. And lastly, to showcase setting menu AppendTo to an element instead of inline or parent, you can actually attach an element, for example, document body. And you could also write this as a function that returns document body if you wanted to. And of course, you could set this to any other selector. You could use any document query selectors if you wanted to attach this to any element. Now that it's attached to document.body, if I take a look at this again, you can see that it's now attached directly under the document body. So here's HTML body, and at the bottom of this list is now a dropdown. So those are the different ways you can use this menu AppendTo prop And then just a quick sneak preview. This issue also calls out that we would make changes to tooltip and popover. Currently, our tooltip and popover components use a third-party library called tpjs. And essentially what we're doing here is we use that to position the popover relatively to the trigger. Using tppopper, it actually has several layers of HTML elements. You can see that it basically adds a tppopper div element, and within it you have a tippy tooltip element, and that's where we attach the popover class. And there are several issues with this. First of all, I mean, obviously the DOM is not that clean. Essentially what we're doing here is we are theming the tippy component, so it doesn't look quite like, if you were to look at the PatternFly core example, and also the arrow that is inserted is actually, we are actually in a way hijacking the tippy arrow and just giving it the tippy arrow class name. And you can see that tippy is positioning it for us. So this is kind of the old way. What we're now transitioning to do is to switch completely over to popper.js, which gives us control over the output. So here's the same example now in my local workspace, but using popper.js directly. And you can see that if you take a look at this element, it's much cleaner. Top level element is the popover class, and we can also correctly use the modifiers to position the arrows ourselves. And the arrow that is being used is actually our real arrow. And all that popper.js is doing is adding positioning attributes right here. So this change will be wrapped up this sprint for tooltip and popover. So next time around, you should be able to view this and play around with this. That's it.
Perfect. And now it's my turn. So I'll highlight a few more recent changes to React. First, Titani added an inset concept to the divider component. The new prop can be set to a default size. So in this example here, you can see that it's set by default to medium size. And so no matter what width of the page, it stays so that the indent or the inset, I guess, of this divider doesn't change. But you can also set it to be defined differently at various page widths by passing it more information. And you'll see that as the window shrinks, maybe hard to tell, but the difference widths, inset gets smaller or larger. So that's handy and will provide a lot more control. And it can also be used, the inset can also be used on the vertical divider. A little harder to see probably on the screen share because it is a very small divider, but I think as I drag this, it might change. It's by default set to medium on this example, and on this one, it will change. See, it got a little smaller. It's hard to see probably in a screen share, but it is very fancy. The next update is to the table. There's a new beta feature that allows for a table row to be editable with the select component. And I mentioned it's still in beta, so anyone interested is welcome to play with it and try it out. But here you can see that if I go to edit this table row, we now have the ability to add a dropdown to modify the contents of the table cell. You can use a standard select component in here. You can also use some of the other select variants, such as the multi-select type ahead. That works. And the last one that I have in this demo is just the standard multi-select. and it appends all of the selected options into the cell. So just something worth playing with, and it I'm sure could be improved upon the more we play with it, but yeah, it's pretty exciting. And the third enhancement I have here is the modal. Now we'll automatically add a tooltip to any modal title that is too long for the modal header. So as I hover over this very long modal header, the full contents are displayed in a tooltip. And the last update I have here is that Michael Spaxman has added an is Aria disabled prop to the button component. The Aria disabled prop looks like that, and they look like disabled buttons. Usually they would be used like a disabled button, but in this case, the Aria disabled prop allows the button to still be focusable, to have focus. So it allows you to do things like put a tooltip on the button. You can see it in the example here. And it can be a button or a link, but before that would have not been feasible. So thank you, Michael Spaxman, for that enhancement. And all right, that's all I have for the React updates, but Zack is going to walk us through an update made from the PatternFly Infrastructure team. So take it away, Zack, your turn.
Yep, I'll steal the screen. All right. Can you guys see?
Yes.
Yep, we can.
Wonderful. Okay, so this was the change. It was to add display names to pretty much all of our components that were missing them. There's a lot. This PR was really big. Yeah, it touched like 400 files. And so what this means for consumers is that in React DevTools now, every single PatternFly component should have a name. So if you go anywhere on PatternFly.org or you inspect in your own code, you should always be able to see our names for our components. So before, some of them weren't getting names when they were built because of transpiling, them being anonymous. Those arrow functions are anonymous and don't have names by default, but now they should have names. And this also affects the snapshots. So whereas before in snapshots, sometimes you were seeing this component thing for our PatternFly components, you shouldn't see it anymore unless you do a render shallow or a shallow render. In those cases, you still might see component because that's Enzyme being lazy and saying, I won't render past, whatever depth you told me, because that's what shallow does. So those are the only times you should still be seeing component instead of the proper full name.
All right, thank you, Zack. And that is everyone. So we have a few minutes to spare. Thanks for joining. I'll be posting this recording to the PatternFly YouTube channel shortly, and I hope you all have a good rest of your Tuesday. Good job, team.